Okay, great. Well, hello, everyone. Welcome to our session of AAC 101A, because this is going to be a two-part series. In this session, we are going to do an overview of what is AAC. This is a question that we hear a lot, in the sense that people either use different describe different things as AAC, or just get really confused about what people are actually talking about. We love our acronyms here in special ed and in education in general. So we're going to try to, through this session, clarify and define some of the components of AAC, because as some of you may know, it's a huge umbrella of a term. My name is Enid Hurtado, and I represent the Kentucky Autism Training Center, and I'm going to talk a little bit more about that in a couple of slides. Before I get to that part, though, I just want to let you know that I put together a participants folder for this session. So if you would like to either type this bit.ly, or Amanda, if you want to go ahead and type that bit.ly into the chat window and they can click on it, or if you have your iPhone, tablet, just another device around where you can take a picture at the QR code, it'll bring up a folder on Google Drive, and inside you'll find the PDF of this PowerPoint. You'll find something, we talk about acronyms, right? And CAEP, EBP report. So basically, I will also talk more about what that report is all about, but it's in there. And then I'll have 4 different folders of information that, again, you'll understand better later on in the presentation. But feel free to access them now. And if I know for some people, they like to look at the PDF of the PowerPoint as I'm presenting. And so in either preparation or in review, in case, they have a question or they're just not clear on something. Or they want to.
I went ahead and dropped that in the chat, so they should be able to access it without any issue.
Great, thank you. All right, so some people ask, because AAC is relatively one of the new evidence-based practices in the world of autism, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. But as you will find out, and as you can look on this slide, my background is as a special education teacher, and usually AAC is explained by a speech and language pathologist or an assistive technology person. But as you can see from this slide, I have lived AAC for 18 years of my life, both in my professional world and in my personal world. And that was not on purpose. I didn't pursue it. It's just life happens, and that's just how it worked out. One thing I did pursue was becoming a special education teacher. And in that world of the way that opportunities led me, I ended up teaching individuals with autism. Most of them were either nonverbal or did not have functional speech. So that's when I first got into the AAC world. And then at the time when I first started teaching, there were very few classrooms where they were only individuals with autism. And I know that's a lot of the districts here in Kentucky also have that same classroom where you just have students of all different types of abilities. So as you can see on the left side of this slide, I have some pictures of my students who, believe it or not, I still keep in touch with. And who really taught me a lot about AAC. From the devices that people relate to AAC, to the communication boards that you see right there on the bottom left corner, to all the supports that we provide students to help not only express themselves, but also understand their environment, which again, we'll talk a little bit more about it. Now, it just happened that at the same time that I was teaching, my father had a massive stroke, and as you can see, that where it left him with severe apraxia and aphasia and was paralyzed on the right side. So I was able to not only professionally work with AAC in the terms of students, but also in terms of my father, and go through all the different levels that he was, because as you know, with apraxia and aphasia, especially severe, not even communication supports worked at a certain point. Then when I finished teaching, I well, I shouldn't say finished teaching because I did go back, but there was a point where I had the opportunity to go work for Mayor Johnson, Toby Dynavox. And Mayor Johnson, as some of you may know, is the creator of Boardmaker, or was the creator of Boardmaker. They are now part of Toby Dynavox, which, for those of you who are familiar with AAC, Toby Dynavox is one of the companies that creates the more robust, higher tech speech generating devices. So for 8 years of my life, I was not only, I used the experiences as a teacher to then go out and I was an educational specialist, which I trained people on how to use the Boardmaker program to meet the needs of their students in the classroom and in different educational settings, mostly individuals with autism when I was with the Mayor Johnson part. But as the two companies converged together, I also worked with the SLPs and assistive technology and all the staff over on, I should say the team over on the Toby Dynavox side. So in that sense, I became very immersed in the AAC world and assistive technology world on all different levels. But I also had my father on the other side, and my personal side, in which we were constantly re-engineering his environment and training people that, you know, were responsible for his caregivers, and for me explaining to my family, because for my family, they do not come from the world of teaching. And it was really challenging for them to know how to communicate and be with my dad, who no longer had a voice in the more typical sense. So AAC is very personal to me. So this presentation is an overview in which, in my role, in all my different roles, I find that this is the information that helps people really understand the benefits of AAC and realize that more people use AAC than they think, or can benefit from AAC than they can think.
Enid, this is Amanda, and I was just going to say, I think that's what makes your experience so important. You know, a lot of people that are in special education usually have a personal connection to why they're in that field. But in terms of AAC, I think you made the best statement that I've ever heard. AAC is much more common than we think. And there are many more people using some type of alternative or augmentative communication in the world than there's not. So I'm super excited about some of the things you're going to share today, because I think when we look at thinking of AAC as something common, it opens our world and the world for our students as well.
Right, because I think a lot of people, and it's easy to do because there's so many things to learn, especially when it's new and you've never, you hear this acronym, to just identify it as one thing. And AAC is so many things. And like you said, it's so many things that we're already using, but we just don't think of it as AAC. So really quick, I did mention at the very beginning that I am now a school field training coordinator for the Kentucky Autism Training Center. And so basically what this means is that our center covers the whole state of Kentucky. We're based out of University of Louisville, the special education department. And that's just to, like you can see that last sentence, it's just to bridge research to practice and training collaboration. So my particular job, I represent a group that works through an initiative, a state-funded initiative, in which we work with schools that apply to be part of this program. And we can work with teachers, we work with just one specific school, or can we work with the whole school districts to be able to provide training and support to use evidence-based practices. And the reason I mentioned this is because AAC, as of last year, became one of those evidence-based practices. And that's one of the reasons why we're presenting this presentation. It's not new, though. It's been around for a long time, as many of you may know. But as in the world of autism, it has now become part of the list of the evidence-based practice that they found to be effective with individuals with autism.
And that's a really important point to bring up, because a lot of times you will hear, in your IEPs or compliance or within your districts, they're wanting to use these evidence-based practices. Now you can pull the information that Enid has provided in this folder and say, hey, look, we are using an evidence-based practice.
And we have been too. You're going to find,
Absolutely.
I hope you find this presentation validating as well, saying, oh my gosh, I have been using AAC and I can use AAC with more of my students because I have the experience to do so.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about evidence-based practice, since this is, and for some of you, this is old news, but I just wanted to clarify that AAC, the reason why it just made it on the list, and in some other practices just made it on the list that have been in education in general for a long time, but just made it on the autism list, is because now there is a set of research, evidence-based research that has been peer-reviewed, has shown that AAC has been effective for students with autism. We hear, so basically, with evidence-based practice, we have respected educational researchers that have provided an acceptable level of research as defined by the agency whom defines it as evidence-based. In our terms, remember I told you that it just became part of this list? Well, you may be wondering, what list are you talking about? Well, for this presentation and for our agency, we go off the list that is created by a widely respected agency. And that's that acronym you saw, the NCAEP, which is the National Clearinghouse of Autism Evidence and Practice, which is associated with the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill. And so as you saw on that first slide, I did put the report that has the description of AAC in there as being evidence-based practice for individuals with autism. It's on page 66. I don't think I put that on there, but I was looking at something else that I did earlier, and I called out page 66. So you may want to write that down. And the reason I put that report in there is that, I mean, for different reasons. You could use it to learn more about it. It's very user friendly. I love the way they wrote it up. It just came out last year, so this is the newest list. And you can show it to other people who may not, be sure about AAC, or they have one set of an idea of what AAC is, and you can show them what the evidence shows is AAC and how it defines AAC and how it works. Oh, there it is. Okay. So what is AAC? I keep using that acronym and I keep talking about how great it is and it's all evidence-based practice, but what is it, right? What is AAC? Well, first of all, for those of you who are not sure what that acronym means, it represents augmentative alternative communication. Now, those three words are huge categories in themselves, right? Just the word augmentative, just the word alternative, and the word communication. Each of these three words by themselves can mean so many different things. So that's the reason why I describe AAC as a big umbrella of a term. And so let's talk about what the NCAEP defines AAC as, what ASHA defines AAC as, and with how the schools look at it. But before I did that, I talked to a few people and asked them, what do you think AAC is? And this is the feedback that I got in general. I mean, I kind of combined a few to represent these different types of people. So from a parent to an LBD teacher to an MSD teacher and to a speech and language pathologist. So which are any of them incorrect? Are all of them correct? Are some of them wrong? That's right. Maybe there's some that you can relate to. Maybe you're wondering like, well, yeah, that person's correct, or that one's more correct than the other. Well, believe it or not, going back. All of them are correct. Okay, because of the fact that it is such a huge umbrella that it could mean different things for different people, for different students, different ages. It just depends on what they need. So according to the report, this is the one that you have, and this is the link to it if you want to share it with somebody else, because you have this PowerPoint as a PDF in the folder. So it represents unaided communication systems. So that means, sign language and gesture. So anything that's going to provide communication. Aided communication systems. So we're thinking Pecs, we're thinking GoTalks, we're also thinking Proloquos, and we're talking about the large devices like Dynavox, and so many others, right? I'm not even going to go down the list of all the different companies that have the big oh, sorry guys, I'm not sure why that keeps clicking.
Zoom.
It also represents the methods of teaching AAC. Okay, so this is because remember, these are all evidence-based practices, so they're always going to talk about how you teach them. So we also will go over today about aided language modeling. Okay, you also may hear it called aided language stimulation. Okay, which also incorporates other evidence-based practices. So you'll see that EBP acronym a lot, such as prompting, reinforcement, visual supports, and peer-mediated interventions. And that's the folders that you see in the participant folder. I'll have links to lots of resources on how to learn more about them or to share with other people. But I did put some resources in there just to make it user-friendly for you to find information about it. But who are the experts, right? Who should decide if a student needs AAC or what type of AAC, especially when it comes to the alternative part of the AAC term? And that is usually the speech and language pathologist or speech teachers or SLPs, whatever it is that you usually refer to them by, or you refer to yourself by. And the reason is because they're the experts, right? If you're an SLP, you're the expert on expressive language disorders and receptive language disorders, hence the SLP, right? So you have your assessments, and there's so many different assessments that you can do, formal and informal. Now, I know that hasn't always been the case, but now there are different assessments that you can do to decide what will be the best type of AAC to provide for a student. Where should they start on the continuum of AAC? That can also, that's that depends on how you talk to too, right? Some people think that students who are nonverbal or who don't have functional speech should go straight to having one of those high tech or mid tech devices. Some people think that they should start with Pecs. Some people think that they should start with just the exchanging. I'm not exchanging, just the communication boards. So it just depends on the expert of the SLP and what they decide to do. So some of the vocabulary, I'm not sure if this audience really needs this type of vocabulary, because again, I was just going in an overview, but just because what I hear from teachers really, and SLPs that work together at different schools, because remember I told you we cover all of Kentucky. And so when I have the classroom sites, I hear a lot of feedback about, well, teachers don't really know what the SLPs do or what their expertise really means, right? They're just supposed to deal with speech. They don't realize that they have a responsibility to also teach the language aspect. And I think that's the part that's lost on the AAC part. So I put this vocabulary in there just to make sure that everybody's clear on what the speech and language part of the pathologist, the SLP part, really means. That SLPs are responsible for teaching all of these skills, assessing and teaching all of these skills, and building a plan with the IEP team and working with the teacher and all the other carers on helping the student not only learn to and fine-tune their ability to speak, if that's the case, verbally or functionally through some type of alternative device, but also understand, right? Also understand language, be able to use language to communicate. So that's also part of the AAC category. Another expert source to look at is ASHA. So for those of you who are speech and language pathologists, this is your professional organization. This is when, for those of you who are not familiar with the SLP world, this is when you see C's, 3 C's by the SLP's name. This is the organization that gives them their C's. They have to complete certain professional development and tasks to earn their C's. And so we'll look a little bit about how ASHA describes AAC. And you can see there's this more technical area of clinical practice that addresses the needs of individuals with significant and complex communication disorders. That's another term you may hear in the AAC world, complex communication disorders. You even may see the acronym CCD. I know that's what we talked a lot about when I worked for the assistive technology company I told you about. Characterized by impairments in speech language production or comprehension, including spoken and written modes of communication. So I'm just emphasizing the written part, right? So, I mean, that makes sense when we look back at the definition of the language part and what they're responsible, right? So now I think as I'm calling these out, I want you to start thinking about all the different supports that you need for a student to be successful at writing and using words and learning to write and learning words. And that's the part that's going to fall under the augmentative part of the AAC. So ASHA, and I have a link to ASHA at the end. So if you want to look at this, and they have a lot of, you can imagine, different information supports, that you could provide to other people or just to learn more for yourself. So I'm just summarizing this, the AAC definition from ASHA. AAC uses a variety of techniques and tools, including picture communication, boards, line drawings, speech generating device, which is what most people relate AAC to, tangible objects, manual signs, gestures, and finger spelling to help the individual express thoughts, wants, needs, feelings, and ideas. So there you go. We're not only talking about the basic needs and wants, right? We're talking expressing thoughts, expressing ideas. I think we think feelings that we definitely want them to express it, especially when they have some type of undesirable behavior, right? Because a lot of students who don't have, are not verbal or don't have functional speech or have, a challenging time with speech when they get very anxious or frustrated. A lot of times we see a lot of undesirable behaviors, and then that's why they get assessed, or that's when everybody pays attention to the fact that they can't express their needs and wants and feelings. So we usually get stuck right here at the wants, needs, and feelings part, but it's also talking about having them express their thoughts and ideas as well, which may lend itself more to the writing part, but doesn't have to, right? It's just giving them that vocabulary and teaching them how to use that vocabulary to be able to express ideas and thoughts as well as their basic needs, wants, and feelings. Another great resource is the Vanderbilt University. I use this website, especially for younger kids. They have a lot of great resources for teaching AAC with younger kids. But their definition, and I really like this one, and I use this too, and when I'm just talking about AAC on really quickly during a presentation, is they really call out the difference between augmentative and alternative. So augmentative is when it's used to supplement existing speech. Okay, so the ones with the writing skills. So and it could be speech that's an alternative speech. An alternative is when it's used in place of speech that is absent or not functional. In short, AAC can support both expressive and receptive language communication. So I really like this definition because I think it's very concise, easy to understand, and it just breaks it down and tells it how it is. Right? So I kind of led you down the road, built up to get to this definition, because I think when you read this right now, you're like, yes, everything you just said is perfectly said right there in that definition. And so they, and then they go on to explain. So this is augmentative. So these are my examples, by the way, but I put links to some other examples as well. So let's talk about the augmentative part. Augmentative is an addition to speech. So I love how simple that definition is, because I think it really clarifies how AAC is used when it comes to everything around a student's ability to speak, right? Why it includes so much else. So that includes the schedules, right? That includes anything that's going to help them understand receptively the expectations that they need to be successful, as well as be able to express what we just listed, their needs, wants, feelings, ideas, and thoughts. So visual schedules, first then charts, another great way, right? So a lot of people look at these as also behavioral supports, right? So some of these overlap in different categories. Sorry about that. My cursor is very sensitive right now. Graphic organizers are great for story grammar, right? So think of all the different graphic organizers. AAC also includes those as well. And now these are all great for individuals with autism. Okay. That's probably put it now. I think for those of you who do work with individuals with autism, you can see why this became, and you're probably wondering why it wasn't earlier. It's probably just not the lack of research that just specifically looked at individuals with autism. But why that this works so well for individuals who need that visual representation of information to help them understand what's expected of them to be successful with a task in a setting, an environment. And we know that visual schedules work. They help with transition. First then dot charts help with cause and effect, also with transition. Graphic organizers, now here we get to the higher level with the helping them understand abstract ideas and abstract thoughts, right? And then also help them organize their own ideas and thoughts into a form that will allow them to easily express it, whether it's for academic purposes or it could just be for personal reasons as well, which in that sense, that's for every kid who's learning how to write and be able to express their thoughts and need. So the alternative part, right? So that's augmentative. And now for alternative, what did they say that might look like? Well, they divide it into two different categories. The low and light tech, which pictures, objects, photographs, writing, communication boards, and books fall under. And then there's the high tech, which is the speech generating devices, single message devices, and recordable. So like the Go Talks. I think that's probably the most common ones that we see in the schools. And AAC software that enables dynamic symbol language representation. So probably one of the most common ones is Proloquo, okay, that people usually think of when they think of individuals with autism using AAC, or just individuals in general. But there's a lot of different ones now. But these are the ones that can be played on, most tablets, like you can see on the smartphone. So these are a little bit more adaptable. Some places they call them mid-tech devices when they're not that speech generating device, because the speech generating device can also be an environmental control unit as well. So it really can do a lot of different things to help an individual be as independent as possible. Okay, so let's see what each of these look like. Low tech communication devices. So again, here's our Pecs, which Pecs, it's interesting because Pecs used to be listed on its own on that report that I was talking to you about, because that report first came out in 2014. And I'll just do a quick aside because I think it's a really cool story. That report represents actually 3 different universities. And the group that puts it together was initiated by parents in the autism world who were just tired of all these fad practices, all these fad strategies coming at them, and they didn't know what was effective, right? What was research-based. So they really, really create through a grassroots effort, had these 3 universities create this agency to look at all these fads and strategies. And, some of them obviously were evidence-based practices, because in general ed, they were already evidence-based practices. But they wanted to have proof that they actually worked with individuals with autism. And so that's how this whole agency in this report was created. So Pecs was listed on its own. And last year, it dropped off the list, not because that there's not evidence of its efficacy, because we all know that if anybody's had any experience with Pecs, we know that it is effective if you implement it correctly. But Pecs falls under AAC, right? So now if you look at this report and you're like, well, Pecs isn't on there, but I know that's effective. Well, that's because, as this presentation is telling you, Pecs is a form of AAC. It could also look like homemade binders or books of picture symbols. And I'm sure that some of you have seen this before, just even an alphabet Um, and alphabet support, of course, our communication boards, and then our books of communication as well. And there's a lot of different types that are out there. So Pecs isn't the only one. It is evidence-based, where these others by themselves are not. It's because Pecs has a specific procedure that you need to follow, right? For if any of you are familiar with it, you know, there's different levels. They've been around for a very long time. But these are also considered AAC and do work as well. Mid-tech communication devices are the record speech devices like the Go Talk or the Big Mac Communicator. Electronic tablet is like what I was mentioning, the Proloquo, where you can put it on all the different tablets. I don't really think that's a picture. And then the high-tech communication devices are from my neck of the woods, Tobii Dynavox. There's also, I don't know why the Vanderbilt only listed Tobii Dynavox, but there's, as you know, there's other companies as well. Okay, so how do you teach, right? How do you teach AAC? This is another thing I come across a lot when we work with the schools, is that, okay, say the student, has the iPad or the Proloquo or the communication board, but they don't go over and use it. And the staff is just really frustrated. They modeled it, they include it, they have it around, but the student never uses it. In fact, some students can be resistant to it. So some people know about aided language modeling, but some people don't. And I think that the biggest part that people don't realize is that it means that especially with individuals with autism, if you were just to put the device or the core board or whatever it is that is on their IEP, or that the speech therapist has decided that is going to be the best way for them to learn how to communicate, if you just put it in front of them and expect them to know how to use it, that's not going to work, right? If you model it and you're like, okay, now you do it, and they don't want to do it, don't give up on them. I think the part that people don't realize, some kids will get it right away, especially if it's going to get them a high level, a high interest activity or thing, right? But some students need a little bit more time to see it used in all different contexts, to be able to generalize it. So let's watch a really quick video, and you can tell me if you can hear this or not. I did forget to check this right before. Can you guys hear that? Amanda, can you hear that?
We cannot. If you want to just stop share for a minute and then reshare clicking those buttons, we should be good.
Okay. Can you hear it?
We cannot hear it, unfortunately.
Okay. I wonder if it's because I have...
There it is. Josie didn't know how, so she needed to learn. And here we go.
Okay, so I think that is a great video to share with parents, with paraprofessionals, with teachers when you're, especially if you're trying to encourage to give them a little bit more time and to really model it. You saw that at the beginning. Josie just watched them use the device. Then she would just touch one of the words in the phrase, and then eventually she was able to use it. But I liked how that video mentioned how it takes months and months sometimes. So please, if you have a student, or please don't give up on them, or don't think it's it's not the correct one. Not that that's not possible. It could be they're not ready for a certain type of communication, or maybe there's too much on there. But discuss it with your speech and language pathologist. And if you are the speech and language pathologist, provide resources like this to the rest of the team to emphasize how important it is for them to use whatever that alternative communication aid that you have in all different settings as much as possible. And they're going to have to use it. They may feel silly using it, but they have to model it, because as this video emphasized at the very beginning, children learn to speak by watching people around them speak, and learning how the settings, and especially with individuals with autism, sometimes that implicit learning isn't there. They won't notice it. So sometimes it really has to be emphasized, and the learning, the teaching has to be explicit. They have to, really call out why they're using certain words on the alternative communication site for certain settings. I also have some videos down here for low-tech boards, for core boards, and overall. So some other videos that you may want to check out at a different time too. But I really like how aided modeling works. Now, in addition, as with any teaching, there's also other types of evidence-based practices that also need to be used. And so I'm not going to go too much into them. This is the information I provided to you within that those folders. But what I wanted to also show you that was on that PDF of the PowerPoint, these are links to videos on prompting, reinforcement, visual supports, and peer-mediated interventions, which are the four evidence-based practices that usually go along with aided language modeling. Okay, so if you are working with or if there's members of your team that are not familiar with with all the different components that they need to be familiar with to be to use them to successfully use aided language modeling to teach the student how to use their alternative communication support, then you may want to have them watch the videos. Watch the videos first, of course, but either parts of it or just the whole videos themselves. And then over here on the right, Affirm, which is also part of the UNC Chapel Hill group that puts out that report. They have free trainings. You could do a whole module, which is like 2 hours long, and earn a certificate, or you can just go in there and take certain resources to either like for assessments, or when it comes to these evidence-based practices, prompting, reinforcement, visual supports, and peer mediated interventions. They don't have something on aided language modeling yet, and they don't have anything on AAC either because it's new, but they do have a lot of resources on this. And this is the resources that I place in your folder. It comes from the Affirm modules. So, because I know that sometimes when you first get in there, it might even been when I first looked at them, I was a little overwhelmed. And I know you're very, very busy and you're learning a lot of new things this year. So I just put in those folders just the most pertinent information that will help you get up and going, or like I said, fine tune your skills or help you teach others how to use these evidence-based practices to teach aided language modeling. Okay, so one challenge to AAC, especially when it comes to the alternative speech generating devices, the high-tech devices, is that some individuals, and it's usually we hear this from families, but not always. Sometimes some school personnel will have these ideas that for some reason the device or having an alternative way of communicating is going to hinder the individual's ability to learn how to communicate and how to use language. So these are some of the myths that, and I believe that this comes from the ASHA website. It looks I forgot to put where this came from, but I'm pretty sure this comes from the AAC website. So here's myth one: introducing AAC will reduce an individual's motivation to improve natural speech. So you have students who, they're able to verbalize, but they may not have functional speech, and will hinder language development, including development of social communication skills. AAC should be introduced only after the ability to use natural speech has been completely ruled out. Wow, you can see these research findings, and I'll just summarize them for those of you who look at this slide. It's like, whoa, too much writing. Basically, what they found, it actually is the opposite. It actually assists. It creates that bridge for some individuals to actually learn the verbal skills because it takes that pressure off of them, right? I have in our next session, when I just focus on autism, I'll show you this video of the self-advocate she's very eloquent. She's giving a presentation at a conference, but she talks about how she uses a device because when she's tired, frustrated, overwhelmed, like is in a loud place, she gets very overwhelmed by loud noises. She loses the ability to speak completely. And that having Prolo Quo is what she uses, gives her that plan B. She's able to still be able to communicate her needs, her wants, her feelings through this device, even though she's not able to speak it. And before she had her device, she would just throw huge tantrums, or she was a runner where she would run out because she just needed, right? She just needed to, she was escaping, if you look at it as a form of behavior. So yes, so the great research to share with people who may believe in that myth. The second myth that they call out: young children are not ready for AAC and will not require AAC until they reach school age. So this is what I was mentioning at the beginning. Some people believe that that there's a certain process that you go through. You start with, the paper communication boards, really simple, small grid, and then you build from there, which that could be for some individuals, but it doesn't need to be at all times. So please leave it up to the speech and language pathologist to be able to, do the assessments. And basically it's and to use a speech generating device, you need to have, just like a lot of things, right? You need to have readiness skills. You have to have certain skills in order to be successful using certain types of alternative communication. So allow the speech and language pathologist to be able to do the assessments and look at the skills of the student, and look at different forms of behavior and how they function in the classroom and everything, and see if they have those readiness skills before you decide that a child cannot use it. Prerequisite skills such as understanding of cause and effect and showing communicative intent must be demonstrated before AAC should be considered. Individuals with cognitive deficits are not able to learn to use AAC. Setting up low expectations for a student before they even do the assessments. As most of us know, that's not best practice, right? Reach for the sky. So again, allow the professional, the speech language pathologist to see if they have the skills or they have the ability to. And you can see the research findings. A lot of times, they will find that students are able to use, remember all the different types of alternative, right? We're talking about low, mid, and high for this myth. They are able to use it to communicate. They're using something, right? The students are using a form of communication. And usually it's by demonstrating undesirable behavior. So they are able to communicate. Now it's just a matter of teaching the more socially appropriate way of communicating so that they can expand the world, right? And be able to access all the great things in life. All right, well, we're coming towards the end. I have another quick video for you to share with you that kind of just does a review of all the information that I shared. I should say for most of it. I shouldn't say all. So it may. Oh, here we go. And Amanda, please let me know if you can hear this.
Communication is crucial to our everyday.
Can you hear it?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, great.
Lives. We use it to share feelings, stories, ideas, to make friends, and to get our needs met. We began to communicate right from the moment we were born. Communication isn't just speech. We all use gestures, body language, visuals, and text to communicate every day. Communication is about understanding and being understood by others. Some people may need systems or devices to help them communicate. This is known as augmentative and alternative communication, or AAC for short. AAC can be many different things and can do lots of different jobs for people. Sally might need an iPad to talk for her, while Bob needs some picture visuals to help him understand what he needs to do. It's a speech and language therapist's job to work with people to come up with the best AAC solution for their needs. Here are some of the ways AAC is useful. Spoken words are only temporary. AAC provides people with a concrete and permanent visual so they have longer to process information and formulate a response. AAC increases a person's ability to engage with their peers in social situations and to initiate conversations. AAC has been proven to support the natural development of speech and language. Communicating with someone in a way that they can understand opens a door to their beautiful mind. When a person first gets a new piece of AAC, it can seem a little strange and overwhelming. If their family and friends try to use the device as well, it can help it to seem less scary. When you're learning a new language, you need lots of repetitions. It's the same with AAC. People need lots of repetitions often to help them learn how to use it. AAC becomes a person's voice and therefore always needs to be accessible to them. Augmentative and alternative communication ensures that everyone has the opportunity to understand and to be understood, no matter what their challenges are. If you would like to know more about AAC, speak to your speech and language therapist and they will be able to help you out.
Okay, so I feel like that's a nice summary. Again, another nice resource to use when talking to people about AAC. It's cute, right? It's non-offensive. Really like it because I feel like AAC can be a very emotional topic for people. So it's always good to have resources to help clarify. For those of you, some of you may already know of these resources, but I just wanted to make sure that you have access to these. There's the ASHA website. So I put the hyperlink. These are both hyperlinked. You could just click on it in your PowerPoint PDF. And Practical AAC, I did not go into, but this is a blog that's been going on, I think, for about 15 years. And really experts in the field of AAC post really user-friendly articles in the blog, and you can search. Like the other day, we were looking for any types of practical ideas for preschool. We wanted to see, what the experts say, and all we had to do was click on go to the search window and type in preschool, and all of these great resources came up. So definitely check this out whether you're new to AAC or you've been using AAC for a while. You may already know about this blog, but definitely don't forget to use it, and again, pass on information to other people to help them expand their knowledge about AAC as well.
Again, thank you very much for being with us today. And if you don't have any further questions, you are free to go. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks, Allison.